Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators Podcast. My name is Carolyn Woodard, and I am the Outreach Director for Community IT. And I'm very happy to welcome my friend Nura to the podcast today to answer some of my questions about when you have one or two people in your office who are using Macs and no one else is. So Nura, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Nura and Aboki. I'm a senior consultant at Community IT. I've been working at Community IT for about 15 years, helping clients with IT management, planning, IT road mapping, sometimes occasional support. But it's been really an interesting journey. I've learned so much, and I'm really happy to be here to share what we've learned over the years.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us, Nura. So my first question is, if you have an organization coming in, like a new client, and they are all in Windows, but maybe one person wants a Mac, or I think sometimes it happens that it's an organization that's all on Windows machines, but they hire someone new who really loves Macs and wants to work on their Mac. Is that something that we would discourage? Could we say to that organization, really tell your staff member they have to use a Windows, or how do we handle that situation?
Integrating Mac computers into a predominantly Windows environment can be managed, but it requires careful consideration. The first thought or question would be policy on device preference. Does the organization have a policy? So we want to go back to that document and see what does it say, if it exists. However, it's not inherently discouraged to allow Mac devices, but it depends on the organization's flexibility and IT policies. Balancing user preference with organizational standards is key. That user or employee may be a top performer, and having a Mac really would support that individual. So there's that one has to really consider. But fundamentally, that IT policy is where we want to start looking at. Several organizations don't actually have an established policy for device preference. So that could be something to start considering, because there are several advantages in having a policy around the type of device. Another consideration is the support structure. Having the single Mac in a Windows environment or a few Macs, how are we going to support this? So changing your support can be a struggle sometimes, if especially the IT support team is predominantly Windows experts. So adapting the IT support to include Mac devices can be beneficial in the long run, but this will foster sort of the more inclusive environment. However, if you're asking a staff to switch to a Windows device, it might be simpler initially, but could impact employee satisfaction and productivity.
I have heard it said that it's easier to change your support than to change the staff person. The people who are, and the other way too, like I think you'd also have problems with changing people who are very, very used to a Windows laptop over to suddenly everyone's going to use Macs. So I don't mean to cast aspersions on the Mac users out there, but I feel like it does happen more often that you have one or two people that really love their Macs and want to be able to use them. And I feel like, thank you for saying that about the policies, because I feel like, 15, 20 years ago, it might have been something where your policy was just, okay, you can use your Mac, but you're on your own. We're not going to support it. And I think with the changes in cybersecurity, particularly, that's not really an option.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, policy is really top in mind for a lot of IT leaders, because it drives everything else that comes along the way at the enterprise or the organization.
Are there some roles where people really do prefer Macs, that they're better at certain roles in your experience?
Yes, certainly the popular ones are the graphic designers, communication department or even a marketing department may prefer to use a Mac because a Mac traditionally, on even recently, has been have come with powerful applications, and the hardware itself is powerful processing that can allow for graphic designers to render videos and images faster and turn around project more quickly. Video editing is quite popular these days with YouTube and the likes of social media. There are applications that come with uh, the Macintosh operating system, or even applications that were previously Windows only have been created to support the Macintosh operating system. So we're seeing video editors tend to use these Apple devices. Music producers is one, we've seen they are flashy devices, but at the same time they are powerful and so easy for those creative people with creative talent to use. I can even you can look at software developers. There, especially those that are developing applications for the mobile Apple iOS. Uh, so whether it's Apple iOS or it could be an iPhone or iPad, if you're developing an app using an Apple device or laptop or desktop would be sufficient. Actually, could yield better results than using a non-Apple device.
Yeah, I think also probably people in those disciplines also have come up using Macs because they're easier, like when they were a student of graphic design or that sort of thing. And then for other people too, I think one of the biggest things is just if you're used to using it, you just get very used to using it. And when I switch, also, it's like two different halves of your brain. They do the same thing, but in the reverse order in some cases. So it is something that it takes, if you're going to switch, it takes a while to switch. And I think it really does hit your productivity.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about user experience. Once you are familiar with it, some of us have already built an ecosystem, seamless integration with Apple devices. So you find that Apple graphic designer using an Apple device may also have an iPad where they need to evaluate whatever they rendered on an iPad or maybe an iPhone. So that seamless integration also is unique to the Apple devices, and some employees prefer to, continue using their Apple Macintosh device.
That's a good segue into my next question, which is that it is not always that seamless between a Mac and a Windows-based device. I feel like it's gotten a lot better in the last 5 years or so, maybe 15 years ago. Sometimes you couldn't open a file that someone had shared with you, or it would open, but it was all reformatted. There were lots of issues between the two systems. But that doesn't seem to be such a problem anymore. But can you talk a little bit about if you are in a Microsoft 365 environment and you're supporting a few Macs in that office, are there best practices for that support?
Yeah, so Office 365 is a the cloud-based software as a service solution. Being cloud-based, it basically automatically allows you to access those services using a web browser. And whether you're on a Mac or Windows device, uh, as long as you have a web browser, the default web browser for Mac is Safari. Even with just Safari, you can access Microsoft 365 without having to download and install any application on your Mac. So that compatibility with macOS is there. All Microsoft 365 applications are compatible with macOS. So in terms of security, uh, the macOS utilizes built-in security features alongside Microsoft security tools. So there's collaboration between Apple and Microsoft to make this application available on their hardware. Uh, it also allows for Microsoft to provide regular updates as Apple periodically releases major upgrades to their Macintosh operating system. Likewise, Microsoft collaborates with Apple to ensure that there's continuity of support for their Microsoft 365 application. So it's this collaboration that we've seen is allowing for Apple users not to be left behind, and allows for Apple users to seamlessly collaborate with Windows users because they are seeing the same applications regardless of which device that they use.
So if you are a manager or chief operations officer or someone who's in charge of IT at your nonprofit, are there headaches with your allowing a few people to use Macs? What are the challenges?
You know, challenges, I would say, from a support standpoint is primarily is your IT support team equipped with the necessary tools to make sure that the few Macs are not left behind. So they get regular updates when they need to. The end users get support if they are maybe working from home. There's a way to connect remotely to provide remote assistance. Those Macs have endpoint protection on them. So those are kind of questions that CIOs or leaders have to look at. The few Macs that we have is still part of our network. We need to find a way to integrate it into our network. And so some challenges that we've seen is, troubleshooting Macs. If we are predominantly Windows, sometimes we forget the Macs. And the Macs can be a conduit for attacks or for even providing network issues. So it's important to make sure you consider all the devices, whether they are all the Windows or whatever mixed device that you have, including the Macs as well. Look at how you can support them and integrate them onto your network.
That's interesting that you said the help desk and the staff support. So not at Community IT, but at a previous employer, it fairly often happened that I would be, if I called the tech support line and they were starting to help me, they would say, well, do you see this on your screen, or do you, click on this piece? And I would say, oh, I don't have that. I don't see that, and then they would say, oh, that's right, you're on a Mac. So it does look slightly different, and being able to support those staff is important.
Yeah, and not all IT personnel may have expertise in Mac systems, but being in IT, IT staff members can be trained with basic support, just for basic support, to provide basic support for general, staff with some training, obviously involved. You may not necessarily need to have a Mac specialist on your team, but if you have a complex network or a large deployment of Macs, so if the Macs are the overwhelming majority, then there's power and strategy in investing in getting Mac specialists involved to look at how to best optimize the support of the several Macs that you have in your environment. But if there are a few of them, as we are discussing right now in a Windows environment, then those few, the current IT team can have one or two people trained specifically to learn the basic end user support needs and to be trained as such.
Are there benefits or advantages to having a few Macs in your office? Obviously, there's the benefit of that staff member is using the tool that they're more proficient on. But are there other benefits as well? I know Macs are less susceptible to some cyber attacks. Can that be a benefit?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. They are less, I like the way you put it, less. In the past, we would think, oh, Macs are just, they have full protection. They are never going to be hacked. They are never going to be attacked. But that is not the reality. Indeed, there are more Windows devices out there. Hence, there are more threats to Windows devices than there are to Macs. But Macs can be vulnerable as well. So certainly, having Macs a Mac operating system may reduce your attack surface for cybersecurity threats or attacks. Having a diverse set of solution is also a benefit, I think. Different operating systems can offer unique solutions for specific tasks. So there are some use cases where it's best to just use a Mac to get things done. For innovation, some I would say entrepreneurs or nonprofit organization consider using a Mac or supporting Macs, that encourages innovation and a flexible work environment where, we're not going to be pushing hard on people to just use Windows devices. But hey, you're creative, you're adding value. We want to boost your morale and productivity. We want you to innovate. Don't worry about the device. Having a Mac, if you're comfortable with it, will help support it. Just here's one that you should use.
I think the opposite case, you can also say we talked earlier about a lot of marketing departments use a lot of Macs, and I think it can be a benefit to see what something is going to look like on a Mac and on a Windows because the formatting may be slightly different in your email or your signature block or something like that. So it can be good to have the options, knowing that some of your clients or customers or people on your email list are going to be on Macs and they're going to see it in this different environment.
Exactly. I do agree 100% with that. From an IT support standpoint, your IT support team also, as you train them to learn some basic Mac skills, having one or two, a few Macs available to them helps them also familiarize themselves with the different upgrades and features available so they can experience what the end user is likely to experience and troubleshoot it more effectively.
So we've talked a lot about the Microsoft 365 environment. A lot of nonprofits use Google Workspace. Are there any particular challenges to using one or two Macs in your office if you're using Google Workspace as your platform?
So I would say Google Workspace is fully compatible with Macs. It's this cloud-based suite, any web browser. There are a few things that Google encourages users to do. So you have a Mac, you may know the default browser is Safari, but Google Workspace integrates seamlessly with Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge. In fact, they would really say, hey, use Google Chrome if you want the best experience. One example is if you want to access your files offline. So you have your files stored on Google Drive, and maybe you don't have the Google Drive for desktop installed on your Mac. All your files, you go to a web browser page, drive.google.com, access your files, but then you need to travel. Uh, you can't have offline access if you use Safari. You have to use the Google Chrome with an extension there that allows you for offline access, or you can use a Microsoft Edge on a Mac as well, which will give you that access to the extension. Um, Another nice feature that Google Chrome has is the creation of multiple profiles. Some of us in the nonprofit space, we may be working for multiple nonprofit organizations, so under different domains. So having to be able to use the same browser, but with different switching between different profile. That profile could preserve your custom settings, your bookmarks. If you're a fan of using the Google Password Manager autofill, which I personally prefer not to put my passwords in there, but you would have seamless synchronization of those, and the profiles are available to you uh, as long as you can switch between them. So that's one kind of the challenge that a Mac operating system doesn't give you that through Safari. If you need to have the additional integration with Google Workspace, you need to get either Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. So those are the known limitations to me.
I think another thing that comes up in my family, at least, is that Macs, the keychain password manager is also built into and is prompted. And so if you are using that, but then you're on a Google Chrome browser that is also prompting you to save your passwords in two different places, that can get confusing.
Yes, that can be confusing. In terms of personal preference, I use a Mac, and I have a different password manager for work-related stuff. But for my personal, I use the keychain because I just I prefer the security feature set that Apple has over Apple. But it's all personal preference. But certainly it can be confusing when your Google Chrome is popping up and trying to save password, because by default that's what they want you to use their product. So they would have a way to not trick you, but to put it in front of you.
Prompt
And
you.
it's easy. A lot of people, believe it or not, use the password manager provided by Google because it's just seamless. But there are important things that you need to do to secure access to that. So making sure, for instance, multi-factor authentication, or Google call it two-step verification, is enabled on your Google account, whether you're using it as your personal nonprofit or business nonprofit. Your nonprofit organization needs to understand the importance of having another layer of protection. And one of the foundational layers is two-step verification, where you receive a code uh, either through your phone, through an authenticator app or Google Authenticator app, and you enter it as another information that needs to be entered to log into or to access your Google Workspace.
That was going to be one of my next questions, actually, was about devices. So, are there challenges for someone who uses Windows at work, but maybe uses their iPhone to authenticate that multi-factor authentication, or people who use an iPad to work, or organizations that may, some nonprofits give iPads to their volunteers or to their clients? They have to use iPads to access the services or to check in or for teaching educational uses. So does that complicate things?
So generally, having uh, other mobile devices. So what you've mentioned, the iPad, the iPhone, adds to the complexity, but there are tools like a mobile device management tool that an organization should consider, because that tool allows you to enforce policies or security policies to access towards using those devices. So an end user, for instance, if you have a mobile device management tool that enforces a rule on an iPhone, it would then restrict the user from installing just any application. There will be a set of work applications that you will deploy. Line of business application can be pushed and installed on the iPhone. And those line of business application will be specifically used for work related stuff. Uh, Similarly, the iPad can be locked down such that the volunteers do not inadvertently, you know, install apps that are not unrelated to the mission of your organization. So mobile device management tools are available, and there are a number of them that are being offered. Some come integrated with your device management solution. Some of them are third-party solutions that one could consider getting. I know one offer that Apple has is a business manager, and Apple Business Manager is a way for nonprofit organizations to or any business that wants to enroll to have their devices managed centrally. But then that Apple Business Manager needs to be paired with an MDM solutions. Like if you have an Office 365 environment, you could use Intune. If you have a third-party tool, you could also integrate that third-party tool to allow you to manage the security of those devices.
So it sounds like you're saying if your organization uses these devices, uses iPads or mobile phones of any kind, you need to have a policy regulating that, and then you would need to have these management tools in place. And if you were a Windows environment, but you wanted staff or volunteers to have iPads, that is doable. You just need to be intentional about it.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. You need to be intentional about it because there are risks, and those challenges um, could lead to some damage to your reputation and so on. So we prefer organizations to rethink how they use the iPad, how they issue it, and just use it in its limited functionality for serving your mission securely.
That makes sense. I guess it's an existential question. Is it easier to support an organization that is all Macs or all Windows? Or does it make no difference? If you're supporting one person on a Mac, you could support 20 people on a Mac. You could have 50-50, half on Macs, half on Windows. Is there any kind of scalability of support?
That's a very important question. So all Mac organizations, and the other as part of your question is a mixed environment where you have some Macs and Windows. For an all Mac organization, supporting them allows for kind of consistency. It's easier to manage due to uniformity in the operating system. So you across the board, they are all Mac operating system. So in terms of like simplified updates, if you want to streamline your software updates and patches, you can do that. If you need just specialized support, your staff are just going to be trained on focus on the Mac operating specific issues, Mac operating system for specific issues and solutions. Then training users is going to be just Mac related training. So it seems like an all Mac organization certainly has a simplified way to support it. And mixed environment, on the other hand, requires some diverse expertise. Requires staff that can support both Mac operating system and Windows. They need to be proficient in both operating systems. And then you can run into some potential compatibility challenges with software and integration. So having a mixed environment we're not saying we don't like that. These days we can't do without it because the applications that allow for staff productivity are mostly cloud-based. So those applications, because all you need is a browser, having whether Windows or Mac doesn't hinder you from using the application because you need to open a browser and get your work done. However, the device needs to be managed and protected securely. It needs to have an antivirus software. It needs to have a remote tool to be able to provide remote assistance built into it. It needs to be able to allow for seamless integration with the rest of your network. So there could be complexity in management because you have a mixed environment. So there will be more investment in documentation, management, troubleshooting processes, because now you're dealing with Windows and Macs. It's not a double the effort, but it requires a lot more. But one thing that we know it offers is the flexibility to users. Users are happy if you give them options to pick one over the other. So a mixed environment allows for that.
I guess that was the second part of my question was once you have one Mac user, you're going to want to be able to support them. If you're having a conscientious modern office, you wouldn't want them to be just left out, both for your security and for their work, and to be able to work with the rest of your teams. So then once you have one and you're supporting them, you should be able to support more.
Yes, correct. Once you're able to build a model of supporting one, then there's foundational framework that will apply to multiple. As you scale up, if you're finding the ratio is higher, then you need to get more experts in that, invest more in the resources that will support the increase in your Mac adoption. So yes, I do agree that please don't leave your Macs behind.
That's a question I hadn't really thought of was when you are looking for IT support staff, is it hard to find people who can do both or who can support Macs? Is it a smaller pool of applicants?
So I would say in the past it used to be a smaller pool, but now the adoption of cloud has really forced, I would say, compelled the potential IT vendors to invest in resources that would show they have the skill set, expertise to support environment. Because the business is coming from environments that have mixed. Employees have demanded, look, I am more productive using a Mac. So if you want me to add value to your organization, give me a Mac and you see a difference. Businesses are saying, hey, if a Mac is what they need, it's going to help the bottom line, then certainly we'll give them a Mac. So IT support providers have to adjust and be resilient as well to make sure they have the skill set necessary to support a diverse set of environments. So mixed environments are it's one popular ones we're seeing these days. Having those that actually have the years of experience is what you may struggle to find. You find that, hey, we just started supporting Marks, we because, and also I want to add the advancement of the technological tools to support Macs are now more available to IT vendors. In the past, it would be a niche group and it was cost prohibitive. So even if I wanted to support Macs, I would be reluctant to do because I'm looking at what is the return on investment. If I invest so much but I'm getting little, then there's little incentive for me to push forward. But they are becoming readily available and more affordable tools to support Mac. So these days, I believe you may easily find IT vendors that have skill set to support both environments.
I suppose that speaks a little bit to my question of just a minute ago of if you have one, you might as well get more because you are paying to have someone with expertise on your staff and they're only supporting one person. It might make sense for them to be able to support more people or for you to, like you said, provide that choice for staff members who are more, and for hiring as well. If you're going to hire someone who is really comfortable with Macs, then you can provide that. All right, I have a couple of closing questions. We're going to do a little bit of a lightning round. So I'm going to ask you a few questions and I want to hear your first thoughts on each of these questions. So what is one thing an organization should think about when supporting Macs?
Compatibility and integration. You need to ensure that the Macs can seamlessly integrate with existing system and software. Yes.
Okay. What is one thing you wish Mac users knew or would do?
You need to stay updated. So regular updates on macOS to maintain security and performance. Macs are still vulnerable. So when you see that alert to patch, please install the patch.
Okay, and this one might be more of a kind of a blue sky question, but what's one thing you wish Apple would do to make it easier to use Macs in any organization?
Or enterprise or businesses, enhance business support. Apple traditionally have invested in, consumer support products. So improving the enterprise support by offering more robust tools tailored for IT departments is something I want to see. Unlike Windows, we know Windows is heavy in the enterprise, and they have so many tools, but Apple lack that. So that's a wish list for me.
Okay, last question. If your organization is looking for outsourced IT that can support both Windows and Macs, or Windows or Google and Macs, or you need to change your IT provider, what questions should you ask during the sales process to evaluate that MSP's ability to support your Mac users?
Wow. Evaluation, you want to be thorough. So first thing you want to find out experience and expertise. What experience does the MSP have in supporting Macs and Apple hardware? Do they have any certified professionals or specialists in their team specific to Apple technology. If they have clients, you want to have an idea of like in their client total number of clients that they have, what percentage actually max and what percentage is a mixed environment, because that may give you an idea. Okay, even though we have the specialists, but they're supporting one client that has one Mac, compared to others that have a broad number of Macs. So yeah, you want to find out client references. Then the scope of support. Honestly, you want to have a good understanding of what are they able to support on a Mac. Do they have a help desk that can support cross platforms? Windows, Google services, as you mentioned earlier, Google Workspace, Mac. So you talk about your environment and your need, and make sure that it's within the scope of their capability. How are they also managing updates and security? That is important. If you have a centralized way to manage updates, it's easier. And patches where it's consistent, it's happening regularly. And with every IT provider, response times, service level agreements are things you want to ask them about. And then if you have a need, you may want them to tell you what tools specifically are they using for mobile device management. For instance, we talk about iPhones, iPads. Like, do they have a solution that would integrate those, or are they going to be outliers and they have to look for a third-party solution? So that's
Brilliant.
some questions to ask. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for answering all my questions today. I took a few notes while we were talking. I just want to summarize. So we talked about if you have someone on your staff who's using a Mac, don't forget about your Mac users. Make sure that you're supporting their devices and that you are managing them intentionally and that you're supporting those staff. Even if you only have one on your staff, you don't want them to be like the outsider. Make sure that they're integrated. For IT, you need to have at least one person. If you're going to hire someone and they're going to be using a Mac, you need to have at least one person on your IT team that can support someone using a Mac. So don't leave them out in the cold. And then I think you said a couple of times that because everything is cloud-based nowadays, that the Macs are going to work with the browsers, but you need to be sure that you're managing the security and managing those devices and being intentional about that. Does that sound like a good summary?
That's an excellent summary. Wow. Thank you. Yeah.
Nura, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your expertise on this. For all of our listeners out there who have either they are the lonely Mac user at their organization or they are an IT manager trying to make sure they do the best job that they can supporting those Mac users. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.